Welcome back, Mindful Serenity Yoga, or Waking Up in a Busy World. And we're going to continue our questions, our answering of questions from the jar. And I will remind you to please excuse the sound of my voice and my delayed thought processes. I am recovering from COVID. So I'm going to pull out a question. And I will start the clock. And the question I drew out is, why do you think anxiety and such, I think the word is such, why do you think anxiety is such an issue today? Why do you think anxiety is such an issue today? I take a deep breath. It's hard to take a deep breath. And breathe out. I do believe that anxiety is a big issue today. We're seeing more and more cases of anxiety, more and more people reporting feelings of anxiety. And when I refer to anxiety in this way, I'm not referring to the odd bout of anxious feeling or an anxious experience. I'm talking about anxiety as a condition. I do believe, unfortunately, that it is being viewed as a disorder. And by putting a label of a disorder onto a very human condition like anxiety, we may actually be creating more problems in the long run. But that is an issue I'll talk about later on. Let's begin with the question. Why do we see so much anxiety, or why is anxiety such an issue today? I have been saying this for the longest time, that I've been noticing it in between the age groups of 15 and 30, that this anxiety is a pandemic. Everyone you talk to seems to be either having social anxiety, which is fear of going out into public or talking and interacting with others. We see specific phobias related to things like driving or snakes or spiders. We also see anxiety in the terms of generalized anxiety, which would be anxiety without actually having awareness of what is causing it. Now, this anxiety can be, in itself, can be quite devastating in the fact that it comes on so quickly, can take over a person's sense of control and ability to cope. It can come on very physiologically, because it is more of a physiological reaction, I believe, than any other type of reaction, causing the person to tremble, to have palpitations in their chest, or the heaviness in their chest because the heart is pumping faster. We're activating the fight or flight, right? Sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system, which is responsible for assuring your survival. So you're going to have increased heart rate, which can cause pressure in the chest or the sense of the heart beating. Palpitations, you can have trembling because you're trying to get muscles to be activated to run or fight. You can have dilated pupils, you can have a sense of urgency that something has to be done, or you have to flee or fight or whatever. So it actually causes the hormones or neurotransmitters in the body to kind of get elevated, and those neurotransmitters would be epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. And when these are your stress hormones, so while they're raging through the body really is reactive at that point. And it's really a very physiological and not a very pleasant feeling to have anxiety. It's a sense of doom that comes with it too, because you may not feel that you have the capability to deal with whatever is happening that has triggered the anxiety, if you're aware of what that trigger was. So in itself, anxiety is a nasty thing to experience, and if you've experienced it once or twice in the form of an anxiety attack or just an anxious experience, or if you had a full-blown panic attack, that can be quite a problem all by itself, because it's not a pleasant feeling, and we are conditioned to avoid the unpleasant, aren't we, in the society, and to seek the pleasant. So that's where the problem comes in with anxiety, as far as I'm concerned. It's not so much the anxious feeling, this human condition that we suddenly feel so vulnerable in a place that seems dangerous, whether it's dangerous by others' terms or not. It is this desire to avoid the experience. So we want to avoid whatever it was that triggered the anxiety. What we end up doing is avoiding the anxiety reaction, because we don't want to experience that type of physiological, mental, emotional reaction again. So we avoid the situation that caused it, and then we avoid the experience of anxiety altogether because we deem it, and this is where the problem comes in. We perceive anxiety as bad, wrong, shouldn't be. And when we do that, we avoid situations that cause anxiety. We avoid fearful situations that are similar to anxiety. We fear that type of emotion. And that in itself means that we are limiting our lives. If we avoid, for example, we had an anxiety attack in a grocery store and we avoided that one grocery store. Well, it's a big deal. You'll never go in that grocery store again because you know you felt anxious in that grocery store. But that may actually grow to all grocery stores. You may end up not wanting to go to any grocery store. And then it may be stores in general, or buildings in general, or whatever. And it could come to a point where you reach full-blown agoraphobia, where you're afraid to even leave the house. So there's different levels of this anxiety and this anxiety reaction, but the biggest problem with it is the avoidance of the fear. Fear itself. And when we get to that point, that is where I see the pandemic in our society, is that we have people fearing fear itself, fearing the negative emotions, the unpleasant experiences that come with life. And anxiety is one of those. And our avoidance, our need to repress and suppress situations that cause anxiety, those emotions of fear that we have within us, the desire to numb from them with marijuana or other types of things people use these days to cope with their anxiety, which in a sense actually makes the anxiety worse. And I'm not judging marijuana, just saying that statistics and my observation shows that it often makes the anxiety worse. We also may avoid situations that cause anxiety, and it can become a very generalized type of avoidance where we're avoiding more than what actually would specifically cause the anxiety the first time. And that means we're limiting our lives. We're only living half a life. When we avoid anything that's unpleasant, we are actually diminishing the value of the things that are pleasant. 10,000 joys, 10,000 sorrows, they go together. So when we avoid the sorrows or those painful experiences, we are also avoiding, in a sense, all the joys that we could get from life. So the reason why we see so much anxiety now is because people are afraid of unpleasant feeling. We're afraid of anxiety. We're afraid of fear. So we have started to label it as a condition and start seeking medication for it and whatnot, and either self-medicating techniques or, professionally prescribed medications. But the whole gamut of anxiety is becoming an issue, showing us how much we are afraid. And what are we afraid of is a thing we don't actually ask, It is let's get to the root cause of anxiety. If you want to solve a problem, solve the condition of suffering, you have to get to the roots of suffering. So what is causing the anxiety in this individual, for example? What is causing that sense of I have no control? And I think if we were going to go to the roots, we would look at the way people view themselves, they view life, they view the world, is illusion, but it is illusion that's very believable, and an illusion that's pretty well conditioned into us, an illusion that most normal people would believe. So the world seems so chaotic and so dangerous to many of us because we're conditioned to believe that by the news, things we see on TV and what we expose ourselves, the sensory nutriments we take in through watching television and movies and whatnot. We're feeding this fear that we are afraid of. We are actually building it and creating more and more fear in our lives. This wrong perception that the world is a dangerous and bad place, and the wrong perception of who we are as human beings, thinking that we are vulnerable to everything that the world is doing. Now let's look at that. We are actually vulnerable to life. We are vulnerable to the world. We are just a part of life. We're just a part of nature. So just like the animals in the forest are vulnerable to being eaten by each other, we have our own predators. We have our own challenges in life, and that's not going to change. There is no permanence to this body that we live in. There is no no permanence to the things that we value and cling to and hold on to, and are so afraid, again, of losing, which causes the anxiety as well. It is, I guess, where we're putting our focus. We're putting our focus thinking that the world is bad and dangerous, believing that's all there is, believing we are incapable of handling it, because we don't see who we truly are. And so again, if you wanted to get even deeper into this root cause, which goes beyond the perception of the world and self, is that we do not yet know who we truly are. We do not know that we are not the bodies we're in. We do not know that we are not the minds that we're using just to help us navigate on this planet. There is something that cannot be seen, something that cannot be completely understood with a conceptual mind, that guides us and offers us support. If we knew that, there would be no such thing as anxiety. But fear comes from this disconnect we have with the true self, with that divine part of us, with that invisible realm that science cannot prove is or is not there. So if we want to get to the true root of anxiety, that's what it is. It starts out as a fear on a superficial level. But if we trace it back, why am I feeling afraid? We come back to this disconnect we have. And all we have to do is turn inward and start working towards reconnecting. And the more we reconnect, the more we realize there is absolutely nothing to be afraid of. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much for joining. Namaste.